So recently, in a way only I possibly could, I've become very interested with the topic of mini crits within TF2. Taking something like the full crit, which is 3 times the amount of damage a normal shot would do, and then giving it a slightly smaller, more readily available version makes a lot of sense throughout the history of gaming. But as I was going through some weapons the other day, I found there are varyingly uneven levels of both mini crits and full crits spread across the whole 9 mercs. And that brings us to where we are today. In this video I'm going to be going through every weapon in TF2 that can crit in some form and tallying them up to see whether there are more mini crits or more full crits in TF2. Before we begin though, might I ask you to subscribe as it would actively help out the channel a lot. Also, please comment down below whether you currently think there are more mini crits or full crits within TF2. I got the answer wrong initially and I'd be very interested to see what other people have to think about it. Alright, that's a long enough intro, let's get started. So how this video works is going to be pretty simple. As I stated earlier, I will be going in class order, covering all of the weapons the mercs have and tallying up which ones that can crit in their respective fields onto the right score. There are however a couple of rules I have to go through first. So the first one being self crits do count, like for example if you can mark yourself for death with a singular weapon, that counts as a mini crit for our criteria. Number 2 being we are strictly talking about TF2 weapons. We are not talking about spells, we're not talking about intel caps or anything like that, just the TF2 weapons in the vacuums themselves. Number 3, no external buffs or upgrades, so for example the man vs machine upgrades and canteens do not count for the ranking of this video. External buffs also counts the effects of the Kritzkrieg and the Criticola. Shooting a scattergun under the effects of the Criticola does not count as 1 crit for the scattergun, it counts only as 1 crit for the Criticola. The exact same rules apply for the Kritzkrieg as well. And the last big fat obvious rule, number 4, no random crits. Random crits will not be counted in this video because otherwise it would just be an easy win and there'll be no point for me to waste my time on this. There are just a few other sub-rules I'm just going to quickly spitball for time constraints. Number 1, reskins will not be factored in any way, shape or form. Number 2, marked for death counts as a mini crit, so if a weapon can apply a marked for death that counts as a mini crit for example. And number 3 being that some weapons can apply both instances of mini crits and full crits, and some weapons for example can apply 2 different instances of mini crits. Those will be counted as 2 different instances, but I'll explain later when we get to those weapons. I should also state at this point that this video has been worked on over a process of 2 weeks, so if I do make a mistake or forget a weapon I am very sorry, but please do let me know down in the comments below. But with the rules all being said and done, I think we'll just get started. So I'll be covering the mercs in class order, starting with Scout, ending in Spy, and then I'll be tallying up the final results of all the crit weapons in TF2 at the end of the video. Let's get into it. So believe it or not, Scout has a surprising amount of critting weapons. I never really knew he had this many. Most of them of course are mini crits because his damage output is already insanely high, and giving him full crits on top of that would just be absurd. So starting with the primaries, the only one we have to talk about is of course the backscatter. The backscatter mini crits from behind when you're in range of your opponent, and therefore this counts as 1 point for the mini crits. Moving on to the secondaries, we also have something interesting to talk about, the Criticola. Now, I previously specified that any other weapon under the effects of the Criticola does not count as a mini crit. However, the Criticola itself still counts as 1 instance of a mini crit for me. However, here we've run into a bit of an issue. As you see, whilst under the effects of the Criticola, you yourself both deal mini crits and take mini crits. Some might discourage this entirely, however I will not. To me, these count as 2 separate instances of mini crits, and therefore this is another 2 points for the mini crit board. As dealing mini crits and marked for death are 2 separate things, so therefore this is 2 separate instances of mini crits. Now moving on to Scout's melees, and we have a lot more to talk about here. So I'm first going to cover a little double package here, as when you launch the Sandman or Wrap Assassin balls at a certain distance, the Moonshotter mechanic will take place and these balls will crit. These are full crits, not mini crits, they count as 2 points. Now the second one we're going to talk about is the Atomizer. Apparently I did not know this because I just do not use this weapon, but this thing apparently mini crits whilst you're airborne. I tested it in game, I tested it everywhere, I had no clue when this was added. Apparently this was added in Jungle Inferno and I'm just old, but yes, this thing can mini crit as well. The penultimate entry of the bats is of course the one and only Sun on the Stick. This thing fully crits against burning players, this counts as a full crit. And now the last one we need to talk about is the Gunbai. So the Fan of War is a little bit tricky to count. As you see, it deals mini crits because it marks an enemy for death. However, once you hit that enemy that's marked for death, you will deal a full crit. So this weapon can both deal instances of mini crits and full crits. This is one of the few weapons that counts as both points for both categories. So now that we've covered all of Scout's weapons, it's time to tally up our results. So Scout has 5 weapons that can deal instances of mini crits, 2 of which come from the Criticola, and he has only 4 instances of weapons that can deal full critical hits. I knew Scout was going to be one of the longer sections of the videos in terms of crits, but I didn't know he was going to be this long. I'm very sorry for that. Other classes are much shorter in terms of what crits they can and cannot deal, and therefore we will speed through these a little bit quicker. Okay, Soldier. Well, we have a couple interesting things to talk about first off with the primaries. So the direct hit obviously mini crits upon airborne targets, that counts as one instance for the mini crits. But also the Cow Mangler, which not many people know about. The Cow Mangler's charge shot counts as a mini crit, so therefore that's another point for the mini crit section. Now moving on to secondaries, we have a lot more to talk about here. First off, obviously, the big one, the buff banner. The buff banner applies 8 seconds of mini crits to not only you, but to your whole team, so that counts as one instance of mini crits. And then the reserve shooter follows not too closely from behind with its instance of mini crits upon airborne targets. Now when it comes to soldier melees, we have 2 big instances to talk about and a misconception to clear up. So first of all, the big one, the Market Gardener has guaranteed critical hits. I shouldn't even have to say that to anyone. And now the second one being the escape plan, this marks yourself for death. Therefore, this counts as one instance of mini crits for our criteria. Now, the misconception I mentioned was the half Satoichi. I originally thought that half Satoichi soldiers and demos could one-shot each other via crits, but no, it's just an extra huge amount of damage boost. It's not a crit, I did not know that, but you learn something every day, so it doesn't count for this video. So after rummaging the barracks of soldiers' weapons, we find ourselves with 5 mini critting weapons and 1 fully critting weapon. The low amount of fully critting weapons did surprise me, however, I'm more than glad that most soldier weapons can't fully crit. Oh no, Pyro. Okay, right, let's get the flamethrowers out the way first. So all reflected projectiles mini crit. That means every single flamethrower that isn't a reskin has 1 instance of mini crits under their belt off the bat, except of course the Flog, which has 1 instance of guaranteed crits, and the Backburner, which has both guaranteed mini and full crits, so it gains points in its respective parties. Now, in terms of misconceptions, I need to talk a little bit about the Dragon's Fury first. So whilst the Dragon's Fury counts as 1 instance of mini crit, it does not count as 1 instance of full crits. So the stats of the Dragon's Fury are very confusing in that it states that the next shot on a burning target will deal 300 times the amount of damage. These are the same stats as a full critical hit, however this does not count as a critical hit as Battalion's backup soldiers aren't immune to this and it does not show up red in the kill feed. So it's 1 instance of mini crits for the Dragon's Fury and nothing else. Now we move on to the secondaries. So the entire flare gun line can crit. 1 full crit for the flare gun and 2 mini crits for the other 2. And with the reserve shooter already being covered, the only other secondary we have to talk about is the man melter, which can store full crits upon extinguishing targets. And finally for Pyro, the melees. We have 2 to talk about here, those being the Extinguisher and the Neon Annihilator. The Extinguisher can mini crit upon burning players and extinguish them, and the Neon Annihilator does the exact opposite by fully critting upon wet players. So after covering all that, you might be wondering as to why I was dreading covering Pyro to begin with, and the answer being he has the most critting weapons out of any class in the game because he sucks. At the end of our flaming adventure with Pyro, we find ourselves 7 mini critting weapons and 5 fully critting weapons. If you're wondering as to why I think this is, I think it's because Valve thinks that Pyro is generally quite weak, which is why they introduced the whole combo Pyro thing to begin with, and their kind of idea with balancing him basically comes down to giving him an abundance of crits, which just isn't the right way to go about it. Alright, well, demo is shaping up to be quite a short one, as there's only 1 primary we need to talk about to begin with, the loose cannon. So double donks actually count as mini crits. I thought they counted as full crits, but no, they're mini crits. So that's 1 point for mini crits, I guess. And then the only other weapons we need to talk about for Demo Man are the shields, but there is, to be fair, quite a bit to discuss. So first off being, I will be counting each shield as a unique weapon, so we have 3 weapons to talk about. Just like with the flamethrowers, they all share similar stats, but they are of course unique weapons, so it counts for this list. And the second thing being that each individual shield can perform mini crits whilst charging, but only 2 of them can perform full crits at the end of a charge. As the Titurner used to be able to do this as well, but it eventually had those stats taken from it. I do apologise if I explain that in a slightly confusing way, but the basic synopsis is, all shields get 1 point in mini crits, but only 2 of them get points in full crits. So at the end of our shortest segment so far, we find that Demo Man has 4 weapons that can deal instances of mini crits, and only 2 weapons that can deal instances of full crits. I guess I could have at some point in this section made a joke about how the Scotsman Skullcutter does nothing but crits, but I've actually got a video about that coming up in the future, so look out for that when it comes out. Hello, big fan, post-editing Lon'qudor here again. That video actually ended up coming up first, so if you want to go watch that, it's up on the channel now. Sorry about the confusion. Alright, Heavy, my main man. So I kind of find having a main dumb in video games as, well, if you're just playing the character you like, then you know that's fine. but it kind of shows you don't really have the skill nor confidence to play a variety of characters in a variety of scenarios. But Heavy is probably the closest thing I do have to a main, as I have the most fun playing him. But at the exact same time, I'm also very glad he doesn't get too many critting weapons, because heavy lasers are a nightmare to deal with. So when talking about Heavy, we have to skip the primaries entirely because none of them have any sort of crit mechanic whatsoever. So moving on to the secondaries, we only have one to talk about, which is the buffalo steak sandwich. So by eating the buffalo steak sandwich, you are locked to your melee and you are given several seconds of mini crits. This of course is 1 point for the mini crits category. However, one thing I should also add is that this weapon does not mark you for death when you eat it. It only makes you take an extra 20% damage compared to a mini crit's 35. Now on to Heavy's melees, and there's only two for us to talk about here, the first of which is of course the iconic boxing killing gloves of boxing. These weapons have a simple yet effective design. Kills guarantee crits for 5 seconds. These are full crits, that's 1 point for the full crits category. Now the only other one we need to talk about is the Holiday Punch. So the Holiday Punch guarantees crits from behind. Of course these crits deal no damage due to the stats of these weapons, but these are still crits. Battalion's backup soldiers are still immune to them, and it's even specified in the weapon description that these are crits, so they count for this list. So what does Heavy get in the way of crits? Well, after tallying up this very short section, we find that he gets 1 point in the mini crits category and 2 points in the full crits category. Such results were expected, as Valve seems to think Heavy is a lot stronger than he is, but I would still be a little bit remiss if I didn't mention the fact that I'd like some more critting weapons for Heavy, or just a complete and utter rebalance of the buffalo steak sandwich. So the defense classes as a whole don't really have a lot of critting weapons, and there's probably some good reason for that. But my point is that Engineer is no stranger to this rule. Engineer also has only 3 weapons that can deal crits in some way, shape or form, and 2 of them come from his primary slot. The first one we need to cover is the Frontier Justice. This weapon stores guaranteed full critical hits upon centric kills or assists. These are full crits, not minis, like it really should be, and therefore this is 1 point for the full crits category. And the other primary that could be affected by crits in some form is the Rescue Ranger. So if you right click over your building whilst holding the Rescue Ranger, you will pick it up from a distance and consume 100 metal. This however marks you for death whilst you are carrying that building. As previously discussed with both the Escape Plan and the Criticola, this counts as 1 crit for the mini crit category. Now the last engineer weapon we need to cover is the Gunslinger. So I completely and utterly forgot the Gunslinger has this mechanic, but if you land 3 hits in a row on someone with the Gunslinger, the third one will be a guaranteed full critical hit. It seems in the time I've been playing TF2 I've forgotten much more about the game than I've ever learned about it, but yes, these are full critical hits, so that's 1 point for the critical hits category. So let's take a look back at what Engineer has to offer in terms of crits. Engineer adds 1 point to the mini crits category and 2 points to the full crits category. I think it's very difficult to give Engineer crits in any form and make it balanced, so I'm honestly quite glad he doesn't have more. But even so, it is still surprising that the defense classes as a whole don't really have too many crits. So, Medic only has 1 weapon that can give crits in any way, and it's the Kritzkrieg. Obviously, I know I could make a joke about the Ubersaw having crits or something, but it's just the Kritzkrieg. The Ubercharge of this thing gives your teammate crits. There's nothing else to add to it. Yeah, this is a short segment. Well, I mean, we might as well just add the tally now. So yeah, Medic adds 1 build to the full crits category. There's really nothing else for me to cover here. Let's just move on to Sniper. So for Sniper and Spy, I'm going to apply something I'm going to call flamethrower logic. If you remember with the flamethrowers, they were all unique flamethrowers, yet they all had the same air blast mechanic that have mini crits, therefore they all counted as different critting weapons. And if you're a smart fella, you can see where I'm going with this. All of the sniper rifles that can crit upon headshots all count as different weapons, and therefore they all count as different crits, except of course the Sydney Sleeper, which counts for mini crits. And in case you're wondering where the Huntsman comes into this, don't worry, it counts as full crits. So with all of the sniper rifles being factored in, it's time to look at the secondaries. So we have 2 secondaries for sniper that can deal mini crits. We have of course the Cleanless Carbine, which can build up mini crits so only you can use them, and we have the Girardi, which builds up mini crits for your entire team to use. And now, in case you're wondering whether the Bushwhacker comes into this or not, I've decided that it doesn't, as it doesn't give crits, it just reacts on crits. Now for the penultimate time, let's tally up our crit scores and see what Sniper gives us. Sniper gives us 3 mini critting weapons and a whopping 6 full critting weapons. I knew Sniper was going to add a lot, but I didn't think he was going to add that lot. That's the most amount of crits we've had since Pyro. So yeah, those numbers are pretty absurd, but they're only going to get more absurd with Spy, I promise you that. And finally, we have made our way to Spy. So let's talk about the primaries first, and then we'll get into the knives. So for the primaries, we have two weapons to talk about. We have the Diamondback, which guarantees full critical hits upon sapped or destroyed buildings, and then of course we have the Ambassador, which guarantees full critical hits on headshots. And now for the knives. So considering how there's no mini critting knife, I don't really need to specify anything else, but just note that all of the knives deal critical hits upon backstabs, and therefore they all count as critical hits. And that's it, that's every weapon that could possibly count as crits for both Spy and every other class, so for the final time, let's tally up our scores. The final addition to our list is Spy, bringing a whopping 7 full critical hits to the scoreboard. That is absurd, but we do count backstabs as they are full critical hits, so it's legal tender, I guess, I'm not too sure. Before I conclude the final results and end the video, can I just give you, the viewer, a huge thank you for making it so far in this video. This video has taken me roughly 2.5 weeks to make, and I'm so happy to see it over because I'm very, very proud of it. But thank you so much for getting this far. But with that being said, the answer as to whether there are more mini crits or full crits amongst the TF2 weapons is there are more full crits. Now, I originally thought it was going to be mini crits as they're slightly weaker and therefore more easy to balance. However, knowing Valve is Valve, I probably should have predicted the answer was full crits. I mean, no one really even talks about mini crits anyway, so I guess I should have seen this coming. This video was mostly made for my learning's sake, but if you got something out of it, I'm glad you did, as I think this is just cool information to have, you know? I will end this video in a minute as there's just another something I have to say about the channel and a subsequent thank you. So, you see, the other day, two quite large YouTubers in the TF2 scene, mocked my channel, essentially. The one who was streaming was, he just basically gave some low-level criticism without any really construction to it, and the one in the chat was basically just not being a very nice guy, claiming that my videos are lazy, the background footage sucks, and then he proceeded to boast about he spent months fussing over his videos. Ooh. Maybe mocked is a strong word, but there was no construction in what they had to say, and they spoke as if my minor success bothered them. Like, they were unimpressed that I was doing well for myself. I'm obviously not going to give out the names of these people because I kind of just want them to leave my community alone, but I wanted to turn this round and just say to thank you everyone who is currently here for my content as it is, and I promise you it is constantly improving. For example, here's a clip from my very first video. Everyone who's ever played on Dust Bowl knows that spawn camping on this map is outrageous. So let's try to recreate your average stage 1 Dust Bowl experience. Here's a clip from a video 4 months ago. And then here's a clip from a video last week. Fathomably deep imaginations of my mind to present to you 1 to 2 tips for each spy disguise in TF2. How this works is that I'll be covering the classes in reverse order and I'll be giving various tips about positioning, the disguise itself, and how to blend into your surroundings. Do you see the improvement? Because I personally do, and that makes me really happy. I've only been on the platform for 7 months, and I can already see the improvement I've made in that time, and that makes me really happy. But it's a shame if other people can't see it, but I'm not going to try push them to. But if there is a moral to the story, I guess it's that don't become a YouTuber, because you'll only be looked down upon by those who used to be in your position and have already succeeded. But anyway, I'm dragging on a bit. Thank you very much everyone for watching. Thank you to all those who have been here for my content so far, and thank you to all those who will be here in the future. And I will see you later down the sunny road.